Sai Bhatawadekar, and I'm an assistant professor of Hindi and Urdu at University of Hawaii at Mānoa. Before this, I taught German for a while, and I've studied 8 languages, so I come from a sort of varied methodological background, which has informed how I teach now. And I'm going to talk to you today about creativity as the 6th C of language learning, which seamlessly incorporates communication, culture, connections, comparisons, and communities. And of course, project, process, and performance-based learning. I have been attending these seminars for the last few weeks, and it seems to me that our concerns so far, what the questions from everybody say, are namely what are some concrete examples of project-based learning, and how is PBLL used for all proficiency levels, including the beginning levels. So I think I'm going to address these concerns directly so that we can have concrete examples that we can apply to all the various theoretical threads that we have been hearing so far. I'll give you some examples that I do in my class, script and vocabulary art, for example. I'll just list these examples and then go back to them. Poetry, writing, and recital, children's books, which we have talked about a couple of times actually in the last few weeks, documentary films, melodramas and movie parodies. These are all examples from my class, dance, which I hope probably won't get much time to talk about. But basically, I wanted to first assure everybody that creativity does not mean that we abandon our subject matter and devote valuable class time to producing great works of art, because mediocre will do. Creativity starts with a bit of freedom to interpret and improvise, with a bit of a nudge, especially from the teacher or fellow students, to explore the beauty and humor in simple things that we are learning. For example, if you're teaching a new script or even vocabulary in the same script that your L1 has, you can encourage your students, for example, to learn different or new words, trying to put a little bit of imagination into it. If you see the examples, I have written the word for peacock in 2 different languages, in Urdu and Hindi, and as sort of calligraphic / vocabulary art that you can use to reinforce these things in your memory and also explore the beauty of the new script that you're learning. Creativity can be, of course, also another reassurance, I suppose, because when people say creativity, people envision sort of a chaotic, crazy classroom, which is not far from the truth, but I want to also say that it can be pre-planned and well-structured. And one of the most successful activities that I've done in my class, especially at the very, very beginning level, are some basic poetry patterns. For example, a 4-line poetry that starts with a noun, then 2 adjectives, then a comparison, simile, or if you're teaching an as, or more than, most sort of comparative superlative structures, and a final complete sentence of any grammar structure that you may be currently using. So here are some examples, and I've given you Hindi examples and also its English translation, so you can see these are absolutely beginning level students. We were doing this project for Valentine's Day because it was sort of an interim project, but also very important for Hindi and Urdu culture. Is one of the greatest poets, romantic poets, died on the 15th of February. So 14th and 15th sort of comes together for this very culturally significant, emotional day, I guess. So if you look at a very simple pattern, noun to adjectives, a comparison, and a full sentence, and if you just look at love, fresh, sweet, like the drops of first rain. From mango leaves, it drips to the depths of my heart. It's basic, very, very basic, present tense, not much complication. Even simpler in the second one. Love, more or less, as much as I can, I love you. The third one I did with graduate students in an English classroom. We were talking about pizza, and they said, pizza, simple, multicultural, like friendships, be the cheese that binds. We, of course, when we write these poems, we don't keep them to ourselves. We have kind of a standard presence now at the South Asian Studies Center annual colloquium, where there's a student showcase and all these creative activities that we do in class, we present to authentic international audience of South Asian by origin and South Asian by research scholars as well. I want to spend a bit of time with the children's book example because I can give you step-by-step analysis of how this project evolved. In phase one, I actually used an authentic source material from 1980s musical cartoon film from Indian National Television, initially only intended as a way to teach singulars and plurals to my students. But the film, of course, also provided very fruitful cultural discussion on how Indian media at the time was using these fillers, these cartoon films, for educational and sort of moral messages to be disseminated among children to encourage a sort of Indian national identity, unity, and diversity type of value. As we were discussing this, actually one student in my class suggested, he said, why don't we write a children's book inspired by this TV cartoon? We put it to vote. Other students very happily agreed. And thus, you can already see here one of the 8 essentials that you may have looked at, where the students actually took charge of what they were learning and how they wanted to learn it. And thus, they were very personally invested in it, enthusiastic, and very committed to the project. So we agreed that we would keep the initial focus on vocabulary of animals, numbers, singulars, and plural patterns. But then we also agreed, because we were actually in that class, there were some heritage students, some non-heritage students. So we agreed that we could also write these books at different proficiency levels, helping each other. As we started, this is, phase 3 sort of puts a very interesting spin on this. So as we started writing our books, we naturally started making cross-cultural and cross-temporal comparisons to children's books that I read in India back then with those that my students read here in America now. And additionally, this came from a discussion that I had with my friend. I brought in an authentic current conundrum from the diasporic Indian community. So my first generation Indian friend wanted good children's books for her second generation Indian American daughter. But when she went to India, she found all the available books all too outdated and moralizing. And when I discussed this issue in my class, we recognized that there was really a real need for a cross-cultural product which can cope with the fast globalizing cultural values. So we went back in phase 4, we went back to our sketchboard and redesigned our product. Initially, we just wanted to, sit with our notebooks and write our nice children's stories. But then we decided that we wanted to do a PowerPoint children's book with custom animated text and images and our recorded voice reading the story as it went on. And this design actually helped our books for ourselves. They functioned as reading, writing, speaking, and listening comprehension materials to improve our own proficiencies, fluency, and delivery in all these skills. And as we presented our books to the class, we appreciated one another's creativity, simplicity, vision, humor, We discussed what in our lives or in our language learning inspired our particular stories, and further, in very, very funny ways, interpreted those stories for ourselves. And then, of course, in phase 5, we sent some of the stories to my friend and others who were in need of these of such products. I have to confess, though, that the dissemination of such products could be much greater than what we accomplished. But I think that's part of my learning from this initial first attempt of this project that I can apply to many other creative activities that I do. So if you look at the poetry and the children's book, for example, you can see that creativity can integrate heritage and non-heritage students and communities together, and also with students with varied proficiency levels and learning needs that may be in one class. And this, especially those who are teaching less commonly taught languages, we see that this is a common problem for us because we have to incorporate a number of and a variety of students in one classroom. Let's go on to news reports and documentary films. This is actually a very okay, let me give you some examples. So far I've done video news reports on an art exhibition at the East West Center on Indian folk paintings, which you saw in the previous slide. And this project is currently in post-production. I have to edit it and upload it to YouTube. Before that, I did, my students did video interviews with near-native Hindi-speaking American professors at UH who teach South Asian studies, and interviewed them on their use of Bollywood as an educational tool. We edited these interviews and we aired this film, but it's a 20-minute film actually, at a South Asian Studies conference on media and culture. Like I said, we've become a standard feature of our South Asian Studies Center yearly colloquium, which thematically informs actually what creative projects we undertake in our classrooms. I've also done, my students have also done video interviews with South Asian community at the Bollywood Film Festival. And last semester we did sort of a small thing on our emotional reaction to Robin Williams' death. Also because Mrs. Doubtfire was adapted into Hindi, so we could make that cross-cultural connection. This is a visual from the interview documentary that we showed. As you can see, this genre particularly is very, very good for current events that are going on all over the world, not only in the country of your language's origin, but how global events unfold. It is very good for incorporating cultural activities that are going on or off campus right there around you. And also to incorporate multidisciplinary and interdepartmental topics, which may be part of your students' research interests already. And again, this is an engaging, very good tool to engage with the community and culture in a meaningful way. Relatively speaking, actually, these are pretty easy and manageable projects because designing the steps of the project, designing these tasks can itself be a task which can be collaboratively done in your target language in the classroom together with your students. Again, interview questionnaire can be designed in exactly the same way. Let's go to more sort of chaotic, melodramatic craziness. Movie parodies, movie trailers, plays, and so on, which are all collaboratively written, directed, performed. Some examples again, we did a happy ending Titanic in Hindi, Bollywood inspired. We did a Simpsons episode of Apu's Wedding, which is in English. We did it in Hindi. We also did a recycled love story in which we did an arranged marriage scenario with a theme of sustainability and recycling for one of the conferences. We did a parody of arguably the most iconic Indian Western film that came out in 1973 and was redone actually in 2013. We also did a hand-me-down Romeo and Juliet, which was actually, it was a blockbuster Hindi Bollywood adaptation of Romeo and Juliet that we saw, and then we did a parody of the adaptation, hence the hand-me-down. And then we did a cup stacking World Cup, which is a parody of a Olympic runner. And we decided that instead of being a runner, he's going to be a cup stacker. Anyway, I can actually don't have much time to go into the logistics of how this very, very complex, very creative, organic process evolves, which goes from watching the movie, discussing it, distilling key information, scenes, maintaining key dialogues that run in the blood of every South Asian, which we don't want to touch because they are so sacred. But at the same time, rephrasing entire scenes into very, very small, concrete, simple constructions that will still retain the meaning. Rehearsals, auditions, revising, collaboratively writing, performing, editing, recording, editing, and putting it all together as a YouTube movie, which we have done. Trust me, it's one of the most complex, organic, vibrant, dynamic, hilarious, joyous, and empowering experiences of my life, and I wouldn't go through another year without doing such an amazing project in my class. It's because it doesn't only is an extraordinarily valuable tool for language acquisition and very, very long-term retention. You have, you kind of get surprised with your students who use their lines from the play in everyday situations because they're so drilled in their head and they know how to use them. It's incredibly rewarding, actually. So it's not just for language acquisition and retention, but also for 21st century skills, such as thinking outside the box for creative solutions, conflict resolution, cross-cultural connections. And even beyond that, as a former director of peace studies told me, such creative projects encourage confidence, encourage self-esteem, empathy, appreciation of others, and genuine intellectual, artistic, and personal friendships. That's just a lot of words, and I want to give you an example of this class, which was last year's class, and they did the hand-me-down Romeo and Juliet. All of us were from different religions, Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, Jewish, self-declared pagan, Mormon, and Zoroastrian. We had incredibly different personalities, quite aggressive, pushy, shy, happy, creative, and so on. And we kept pushing each other to the point that we sort of, with humor and creativity, accomplished conflict resolution in ways that otherwise would not have happened in that class. You have, especially, as you can see, Jordan decided to be Juliet. He's gay and very. It was a safe space for him to actually express himself, his sexuality, who he was. He came to class wearing a skirt every day for rehearsals, especially because it was especially precious because the one who played Romeo is Mormon and has come from a very conservative background. And together we sort of challenged each other's boundaries, our values, and we opened up and created very long-lasting friendships and relationships that went way beyond language learning itself. I won't talk too much about dance, but I have to say that dance evolved as a tool of language learning in my class, because India has a long tradition of interpretive dance and expressing words and sentences through symbols, abstracted symbols in your body, and that I used as a tool to learn vocabulary, and it blossomed into a weekly class, which has now become a full-fledged community service where we teach several community members simple Bollywood dances that reaches the instruction of culture way beyond the classroom into the wider community in the world. To summarize, we talked about project, process, and performance-based learning. Again, the project gives us the flexibility to cater to our proficiency levels, our research and personal interests. The process, we have to allow certain madness to the method, as we always have method to the madness, in order to keep the process fresh, but also give sort of organic agency to your students to develop and make their own, take charge of their own learning process. And of course, performance, which gives people courage to come out and express who they are, even to the point of being silly and funny and humorous and honest, which fosters all these incredible connections. So, if you think about creativity as an umbrella, which connects communication, culture, comparisons, connections, and communities, before you know, you have made a connection to critical thinking, and another one to comic relief, and another one to crossovers into different disciplines, cross-dressing too, I guess. Another connection to curiosity, another connection to collaborative learning, commitment to the project, a challenge that they feel very enthusiastically able to accomplish, and the courage and confidence to put yourself out there. And this happens, I can't deny, in a sort of craziness that before you realize your umbrella has become a beautiful creature that you didn't think you started with, and you have a creative, beautiful product that has encompassed all these values that we have talked about, and then you're happy. I'm going to end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sai. We have a lot of questions for you, but we do not have a lot of time for them. So we're going to just ask a few that should be relatively quick to answer. First question is the poetry sample that you gave in the beginning. Is this a poetry pattern found in South Asian cultures?
No. We were talking about different structures. I actually experiment also with haikus, so that's part of my cross-cultural mission, because especially in Hawaii, you get such a diverse student population that it is very, very productive to make these cross-cultural connections. So it's not necessarily a South Asian pattern, no.
Okay, the next question. Are the melodrama activities also at the beginning level?
Yes. In fact, the Romeo and Juliet was second semester, first year. So 1 or 2.
Okay, another question. These all sound like wonderful ideas. However, I coordinate a multi-section course with 8 sections throughout the day. How can I get the public audience involved? I
think performance comes into play here. If you have I regularly use sort of student showcases or these platforms that I can find in the university, in the community, to have the students show what they have learned to a wider audience. And of course, you can also record and put these things on Facebook and YouTube, which has now worldwide dissemination and response. Was that the question? Okay.